So, Job, chapter 42. So, this is the last chapter of Job, okay? So, if you haven't been following along with Job, we really have to, this last snippet means nothing unless we understand what's been going on. So, remember, Job is a man who is righteous in the eyes of the Lord, okay? And there's a little discussion in the heavenly council between God and the sons of God. This is the lingo we get. And there's one who's particularly called the Satan, right? The adversary, the one who is like always pushing against. Well, this Satan suggests that, man won't serve God unless man is sure that God is rewarding him for something. And God says, well, I'm not so sure. Have you seen my servant Job? And God is like so sold on who Job is and his integrity that he says, you know what? Do what you will with my man Job. You know what? Just spare his life. And so all this kind of calamity goes on against Job. His so-called friends come to comfort him. And they all are very clear on, God's motivation in you suffering like this is that you've got to have done something wrong. What have you done? What have you done, Job? Oh, what have you done? Well, we already know Job has done nothing wrong. And so Job, rightfully, he doesn't listen to his friends. He maintains his integrity. His response is basically to cry out to God saying, I really want a hearing here. I need a chance to present the evidence. And he never doubts the motivations of God. He only doubts the actions. He's questioning the actions of God. That's why he wants this hearing. Well, while all his friends, they basically represent conventional wisdom. Conventional wisdom is the kind of wisdom that claims to have insight into the motivations of God. Job isn't so concerned about the motivations. He just sees the reality, and then we got that answer from God's, from the whirlwind, like where were you when I created the earth, and what were you about, and yada yada yada. Job's response is chapter 42. And we've got to remember that God is counting on Job to prove that there is righteousness just for righteousness' sake. God's viewpoint is that Job will serve him without motivation, because simply that Job loves God. It's as though God needs Job, Job needs God. There's like this partnership. The picture is that of partnership, and the overall point is a denigration of popular wisdom. Yeah. So then enters chapter 42. Job answered the Lord, I know you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Now, some exegetes and scholars will say that this is actually him saying, he's actually saying it in second person, you know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours. I don't know that it really matters, because he's stating a fact. I don't think he's stating something that he's just learned, okay? I believe that all he's doing is stating what's already so. This isn't, even if it is in the first person, it's not something that he's just now learned, which means that the second person is just as powerful. You know, it's like, this is nothing new. This is nothing new. And then he quotes God, okay? The first half of chapter 3, or verse 3, is he's quoting out of what God had said. He said, "Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge?" That's what God had said to him. And so Job's response to that is, "Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know." And then he quotes God again. "Hear, and I will speak. I will question you, and you declare to me." Remember, Job had been requesting a hearing from God, but God responded with, "Hear, and I will speak. I will question you, and you will declare to me." Okay. Verse 5 is Job's response to this quote of God. "I had heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you." I had heard of you by the hearing of my ear. This is Job saying, I've heard a whole lot of talk about God. I've heard a whole lot of people saying all kinds of things about you, God. Not all that valuable, but boy, oh boy, do people like to talk. But now my eye sees you. Job had never fathomed that God could create a creature that could act totally autonomous to him. Job is realizing this about himself, and he's realizing now about God. His response here is an aha of, oh, wow, I am in partnership with God. Therefore, and he says, I despise myself. I don't think it's a good translation. I think it's more of a the kind of verb that's expressing like I'm standing down. Okay, I'm yielding. Yield. I think that's a better. Therefore, I yield. I yield. This is Job's exclamation of realizing that you know what? I don't know everything. I don't know what I need to know. Job, we were told by God, he's righteous, and all through the book and the face of his friends, Job continued to maintain his righteousness. He is in partnership with God. In fact, all the suffering that he undergoes is emblematic of the kind of suffering that happens to God in the way that we treat God in this world. Therefore, I yield and repent in dust and ashes. To say he repents I don't think he's saying he's sorry. I don't think he's saying the word means to turn. I turn. He's like I'm declaring an end to this. Okay. Therefore, I repent in dust and ashes. This is a physical expression. Or a physical manifestation of a way to express oneself by saying that this is done. This is done. In the end, what Job didn't realize was that God needed Job as much as Job needed God. What we get in the book of Job is partnership between divinity and humanity. You know, after this, there's an epilogue in verses 10 through 17 where it says, "And the Lord restored the fortunes of Job when he had prayed for his friends, and the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before." Interesting. to recognize that the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before, that's could be a reference to fulfillment of God saying, yeah, I stole from you, Job, and I'm paying it back, just like the Deuteronomic law requires. That's what you would do when you stole from somebody. You would repay them twice as much. Then there came to him all his brothers and sisters and all who had known him before, and they ate bread with him in his house. They showed him sympathy and comforted him for all the evil that the Lord had brought upon him, and each of them gave him a piece of money. A piece of money, that's an interesting expression, a casita, and a gold ring. The Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than his beginning, and he had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. He named the first Jemima, the second Keziah, and the third Karen-Hapuk. Well, guess what? These names are actually names of other things. Jemima is the name of like a turtle dove that would go coo, coo. So this has to do with the hearing. The second, Keziah, this is like cassia, the cinnamon, that spice, something smell. And the third, Karen-Hapuk, which had to do with, it was like a blackening makeup for the eye, that which you would see. So we have the senses being restored, the senses of hearing, of smell, of sight. The idea that all of that is being restored symbolically in the names of these daughters. In all the land there were no women so beautiful as Job's daughters. See, as this is metaphorical for the restoration of the senses of hearing, taste, smell, sight, okay? And their father gave them an inheritance along with their brother. This was unheard of. This was unheard of. Girls didn't get the boys got the inheritance, but these daughters, whose names represent that gift of sensory perception that he was given back, receive inheritance, investment, okay? This is all metaphorical, okay? After this, Job lived 140 years and saw his children and his children's children 4 generations, and Job died old and full of days. What we have in the book of Job is the story of man and God, God and man, in partnership with each other, showing the world what goodness looks like. Goodness is just goodness for goodness sake. Goodness does not have motivation. Goodness isn't trying to earn anything. Goodness is its own reward. Integrity is its own reward. And you know what happens to that? It gets trampled on. Yes, the world will trample on integrity. The world will trample on those who maintain righteousness. That's just what happens in the world. And it doesn't matter. None of that matters. That's the story of Job. The whole story is metaphor, okay? This didn't really happen. This is a teaching in the world of wisdom that tells us the way God is with us and the way we are with God matters. It matters to God, and we are in partnership with God in maintaining sanity in the world due to the fact that we are willing to serve God simply for the fact that that's who we are. That's who God has created us to be. And we're not doing it out of a motivation to be rewarded by God, and that ill things that fall upon people aren't the judgment of God. None of that. I think that's a great lesson. Anyway, we're going to move on. Psalm 34, just the first 8 verses. By the way, Psalm 34 is one of those psalms that is an acrostic. What is an acrostic? An acrostic is a poem, if you will, that each line begins with a letter of the alphabet, and there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. In this acrostic in Psalm 34, surprise, surprise, it has 22 verses. Yes, 22 letters of the alphabet. But it has 2 lines that begin with each letter of the alphabet instead of 1 line, but it's still an acrostic. But we're only looking at the first 8 verses. Typically, these readings from the Psalms that we have with the Job readings are intended to somehow dovetail with those readings so we can understand a little bit more of what it is that Job is feeling, saying, and what have you. By the way, there's a superscription in Psalm 34 where it says the superscription that we don't find those in our Book of Common Prayer, but they are typically in Scripture. In fact, in the old King James Version, the superscription was actually verse 1. That's one of the reasons why the versifications are off. Where it says, of David, a psalm of David, when he feigned madness before Abimelech, so that he drove him out and he went away. If you're familiar with this story, there was a time when David was he was being captured by the king of Achish, A-C-H-I-S-H, Achish, and he wasn't before Abimelech. There was a priest at the time named Ahimelech, but anyway, Abimelech was not around there at that time, but he feigned madness, and he let drool come over his face, and he started acting really weird, so that this guy's wacko, get him out of here, and he does. So in the psalmist that compiled this, put this superscription here, possibly saying that this is a hymn of thanksgiving due to this release. But anyway, in the context of our Job reading, it sounds a little different, but not entirely. Look, verse 1, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. This is basically a thanksgiving for deliverance. My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. Oh, magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and delivered me from all my fears. Sounds a little bit like Job's experience, yes? Look to me and look to him and be radiant, so your faces shall never be ashamed. This poor soul cried and was heard by the Lord and was saved from every trouble. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Happy are those who take refuge in him. It makes a lot of sense hearing this come from the mouth of Job. The superscription about being of David when he feigned madness before Abimelech so that he drove him out and he went away. Okay, that might be a stretch. Anyway, we're going to move on. Hebrews chapter 7, verses 23 to 28. Hebrews chapter 7, verses 23 to 28. What we have here, remember, this writing of to the Hebrews is a sermon, basically. What we have, I believe, is a congregation, a Christian congregation of Jewish, ex-Jewish people, of Jewish heritage, and they are experiencing difficult times. There is thought and talk of, should we go back? Should we go back to the old way? Or do we continue in this? Is this really going to pay off in the long run? Is it really, is this the right choice to go with Christ, Jesus, as the Messiah? So our writer here is addressing this kind of a concern. And so he never denigrates Judaism. He never puts it down. He just merely uses Judaism as a starting point in describing to the people what it is that, how it is that Jesus fulfills everything that Judaism promised, and as a way of prodding them onward to go forward. Hebrews 7, verse 23. Furthermore, the former priests were many in number because they were prevented by death from continuing in office. but he holds his priesthood permanently because he continues forever. Okay, this is something that they were familiar with. Yes, there were priests that stood in for the people. It was a rotating kind of thing. They always had to offer sacrifices for their own personal sins before. But last week he was talking about the priesthood of Melchizedek, which is that eternal priesthood. And here he is very much saying, don't give up on this. This is the right way to go. Verse 25. Consequently, he is able for all time to save those who approach God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. You don't have to worry about this high priest dying out. He's there all the time. For it was fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, blameless, undefiled, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. This is like the most ideal high priest you could ever have is expressed in this, who this Jesus is. Unlike the other high priests, he has no need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sins and then for those of the people. This he did once for all when he offered himself. See, you never saw one of the priests in the temple ever offer himself as a sacrifice. This is appealing to that sensibility. Verse 28, the last one. For the law appoints as high priests those who are subject to weakness, but the word of the oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever. Whew. Wow. So this is our epistle lesson. This writer of Hebrews is just really encouraging them. Don't turn back. Don't turn back. There is much to be gained. It might not feel like it's worth it yet, but it is. It kind of dovetails a little bit with the experience of Job too, if you think about it, right? Well, we're going to move on to Mark chapter 10, verses 46 to 52. Mark chapter 10, verses 56 to 42. This is the last segment of the middle portion of Mark's gospel. The middle portion of Mark's gospel is that portion where there was a transfiguration. There is a confession. Who do the people say that I am? And there's rebuking going on. And Jesus 3 times tells of his passion, of his upcoming death, and the fact that the disciples, and they never totally get it. In fact, they're off in La La Land, are having arguments over who's the most powerful, this and that. And this final tidbit here of them, it's right before he begins his entrance to Jerusalem, is a healing. Verse 46, chapter 10 of Mark, verse 46. They came to Jericho. Jericho is that town that, it's about, it's just to the east, northeast, toward the Dead Sea from Jerusalem. They came to Jericho as he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho. See, he's on his way. Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, literally Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus. That's what it means. Bar is, okay, in Hebrew, Ben is son of. In Aramaic, bar means son of. So Bartimaeus literally means son of Timaeus. So it's like, this should be put like in parentheses, if you will. because I think he's like translating for the people. Or maybe he's just really trying to emphasize this name, Timaeus, son of Timaeus. And I think you're going to get a little bit of that from in my sermon Sunday, because of there's a work by Plato about called Timaeus, and it. I don't give anything away, but yeah, Google Timaeus and see what you see, and see what what kind of a conflict there is. A blind beggar was sitting by the roadside. Jesus has encountered people before who needed healing. He's encountered women who need healing. He's encountered men who need healing. We hardly ever get their names. This one, not only do we get their name, but we get it twice. Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus. There is something that he's wanting us to get about this name that we didn't need before, but apparently we need it now. Okay? When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." We don't hear this son of David thing very often. Son of David is a highly messianic cry. It's also highly political, highly militaristic, technically accurate, but mostly not in the way of the way Jesus wanted people to think of him. But this man who represents something of the philosophical world is recognizing Jesus, not maybe necessarily who Jesus wants to be recognized as the best as it, but Jesus hears something different in this man. Look what he says, or look what happened. Look at the response. Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Yeah, I'm getting ideas from my sermon here, but this is not unusual. We've seen it before, where the disciples are saying to the people around Jesus, like, "Be quiet, don't bother him," that kind of thing. Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." Boy, I'm really getting, this is Jesus talking to the philosophy and ideologies of the day. Take heart, get up, he is calling you. So, throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher," or rabbi, which is what my teacher literally means, or rabbi literally means my teacher. "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way. Typically, what we've seen in Jesus' healings is Jesus telling the person, "You're okay, you've healed. Now go your way and don't you dare say nothing to nobody." But here, he doesn't say that, does he? He says, "Your faith has made you well." And immediately he regained his sight and he followed him on the way. This is the paradigm of the kind of healing that Jesus is giving. This is the paradigm of the kind of sight that Jesus is giving. The kind that the disciples had not given precisely. The disciples were very much still in their own world. They were still in their own blindness. They were unwilling, actually, to have their eyes opened. But this man demonstrates what Jesus came to do and came to heal, which is those who recognize their blindness and the power of Jesus and his ability to remove that barrier for them. And that's what makes it possible then for them to follow him. Remember, where was Jesus going? Yeah, he was going to Jerusalem. He was going to fulfill his work on the cross, on Calvary, and for him to not, push the man away, say, no, just go your way. And no, what we would say if Jesus would push people aside and say nothing, and say, well, this time is not yet. Well, the time is now, yet. It is yet. The time has come. So this man's choice to follow him is due. And he represents something much bigger. Just Google Timaeus. It's a book by Plato. And I think you'll get a little bit of a better picture. I think this is what I'm going to be end up preaching about. So that is it for our Power Bible Study today. Yes, Saturday night at 6 and then Sunday morning at 9. This one I'm getting in under 33 minutes. So blessings on your day. And until next time, shalom.